The drink, we're clicking to the environment. We're clicking to the environment. We're drinking to the environment. Yes.
And we are back. All right. So yeah, I mean, I like how. Well, actually, first off, let's cheers again because we are having such an awesome discussion about this. This is awesome. So thank you very much. Thanks very much again, Ben, for being on the show. Though this is awesome. And going off of what we were just discussing, it's like I I love how I like how you just mentioned that we don't need a green champion to, it just takes someone to actually understand how like the environmental effects or the environmental, I guess, ways you could say that affects us personally and as people, as a common person, and I definitely think that's definitely what we need right now, even whether it's on the federal level or even as local as your local government, like your municipality, your county.
Your town government can have a tremendous impact on the environment, Ted. Mostly through land use planning decisions, right? Because
For sure.
Right, they're going to decide where to build, where not to build. They're going to decide whether or not they need to set land aside for water supply protection or for public recreation. They're going to make decisions about that are going to have the very real impacts on things that are close to you. And again, going back to the fact you're in a coastal community, you're going to have land use decisions made in your town that are going to have long-lasting effects that are going to be climate change related, right? So, are you going to allow building to take place in vulnerable areas? Are you going to do things to increase the resilience of your community? Are you going to take positive steps to try to avoid the potential disastrous impacts of the next storm, or to mitigate what they are, to make them not so terrible?
Definitely.
So there are decisions that can be made at the local level that have that kind of influence. When you get to the broader environmental policies, they usually come from the state level or the federal level. But don't discount any level of government where good behavior and good long-term decision-making and forward thinking can have either right? Again, going back, it's just as possible for them to make bad decisions and have a bad impact.
Definitely. I mean, but for example, like going back to when you just mentioned your local government being able to regulate how they use the land or how they even just help your community really just become a little bit cleaner and just more sufficient and reliant. It's like one thing that comes to my mind is when I lived in Tom's River, there was a lot of plots of land that out of nowhere it would just they would just clean the area out and then all of a sudden just not do anything with it, and it just stood there for a year, and then or a couple months, vegetation would grow and everything, and then they would clear it out again, and you're like, okay, maybe they're doing something with that, and then it just never happened. So it's almost my point is that what kind of positive impacts are gonna why are they doing that? Because it's the compound effect, where it's if you take away little bits of land, clear out little bits of land, after a while it's going to compound into a lot of land, and all of a sudden you're like, wow, this is actually a lot. But especially if we're not using it, I mean,
well, again, that goes to making that's having a sound land use strategy that you have to put in place, right? And again,
okay.
it's going to be decisions that you make about where you want to build, where infrastructure, right? A big part of where we build and where we don't build comes from where infrastructure exists or doesn't exist, right? Is there sewer? Is there water? Are there highways? Is there mass transit that serves it, right? And to make the decisions that we put our investment in creating the built environment in places where we can support that built environment through infrastructure investment decisions that were made that dovetail with those building decisions. And the same way is that we avoid building in places where you don't have either you don't have that kind of underpinning to support it, or it would be extremely expensive to support it, or that there's a higher value in not building because of the water supply or the environmental impacts or the climate resilient impacts or the resiliency from flooding impacts, right? We have a very difficult time putting a dollar, right? We know how to put a dollar value on the building that we build, right? It's a $10,000 per square foot, right? We don't know how to put a value on the water supply.
Well, yeah, but
or on
it's
the
also
environmental.
My other question is like, and you may have the answer to this, I don't really know, but I mean, it's like, because when you keep seeing like, just lots of land just being cleared out and nothing happening, it's like, whether it's for another strip mall or recreation area or whatever the case may be, etc. It's like, if there's the NJDEP, like the land use division, if it's like if it's controlling or regulating like what goes where and other new proposals, like wouldn't they want to be more careful on what they actually put in? Like if you're gonna clear a plot of land, like I would assume that they would want to make it what's the word, reasonable purpose.
Well, that's the thing. The government doesn't get involved in making those decisions, right? Those are economic decisions that get made by landowners, by investors. DP regulates regulated features, right? And that's something to understand, that their authority goes to only what the legislation has granted them the authority to deal with. They can deal with floodplain. They can deal with wetlands. They can deal with endangered and threatened species habitat. Right. So their authority to regulate, and they have authority in the coastal zone as well, through something called CAFRA.
Okay.
And that'll limit, mostly that limits where impervious coverage can and can't go, how much impervious coverage you can have, and again, whether you can build in a flood zone. But it goes back to, if you're not dealing with a regulated feature, it's beyond their capability to make those quality decisions that are left to local zoning and that are left to economics to drive what goes in once you make the decision as to whether or not you're going to build or not. So understand that when DEP does not get involved in deciding, is it going to be a strip mall? Is it going to be a house? Is it going to be is it going to be a factory? That's not their decision to make. But they make a decision as to which portion of the property you can use, whether or not you can use it, whether or not it's in a flood zone, whether or not.
True.
Right.
Maybe I called out the wrong department, but I mean.
Yeah, but so their authority is only what's granted to them by legislation. What you hope is that and again, it goes back, a lot of that decision making is driven by local government, right? And even there, local government's capability of having control over what happens is limited to the zoning power that they have, and the zoning only tells you what you can build or how intensely you can build on it. The biggest local land use power is the power of preservation and deciding where they want to preserve land, because that's the only true build, no build decision that government.
I was about to say, like, I feel like there's definitely certain areas that just shouldn't even be touched, just because also like, and call me a tree hugger, call me a, you know, animal lover, whatever, but it's almost like, or put it into perspective, it's like you're thinking about, you know, say putting another strip mall in this, you know, area A,
Right.
but like maybe I'm going a little extreme, maybe I'm not, whatever, but it's almost like, say you and your family live there, right? You know, it's all woods and you kind of made it your own home. All of a sudden, just whole team just comes in and just bulldozes through it. It's like, what the hell?
Well, and that's one of the other things is that we live in a society where the concepts of public private ownership of land and having reasonable expectations about the value of that land are extremely important in our legal system, and we put that value in a paramount place of our decision making. That depriving people of economic value is not favored in our legal system or our political system. So if you're going to make those decisions and they're going to have an economic impact, you've got to be able to compensate people for what you're you know, if there's a purpose to what you're trying to achieve, then you've got to be able to invest public money to achieve that purchase to offset the impacts to the individual property owners. Now that's subject to you know, right? That's a broad statement, because what's a negative economic impact can you know, has been seen down to you have to make the property basically useless. But those public actions that have an impact on private property rights are always very touchy in our society. And again,
yeah, I mean,
you know, and so that guides a lot of what we can or can't do.
right. And I mean, I'm not saying that every time we clear a plot of land for whatever the project is, it's not good. Because some of them are definitely good. It's like, no, we actually do need, you know, this project X or whatever to be
We're not the Keebler elves, right? We don't live in a hollow tree, right? You know,
right.
we live in homes. We go to, you know, before the pandemic hit, we go to work in an office. We shop in stores. We drive on roads, right? There are necessities of modern society that we've decided are important for us to provide for. How we provide for those necessities of modern society is a qualitative decision that we need to be able to make in a rational and intelligent way, right? It's not, the problem is that we've done a bad job, especially in a place like New Jersey. Up until recently, we've done a very bad job with making those decisions in a rational way. Look, don't get me wrong. The rest of America doesn't do a much better job of it. The rest of America just is not as land constrained as New Jersey is. We actually are way ahead of the curve, because we're so crowded into a small box that by necessity we started to make better decisions about our land use. It just took us pushing us up against the edges of sustainability before we realized that it was an absolute necessity for us to make decisions in that way. You go to a state like you know, Pennsylvania, where they're drunk with land compared to us, and they don't have nearly the same. They don't feel it nearly as acutely as we do, and so it doesn't drive their decision making the way that it should. Every state is on its way to becoming New Jersey. They just don't know it yet.
Well, I mean, wait, how do you figure that they're on, like, now you're almost like making me think that we're like, you know, New Jersey is like the in the lead compared to the other states. Like, how do you figure that like other states are becoming like it's New Jersey?
Right. So what happened is New Jersey, because we're pressed by those demands, that we put the demands on the built environment, we put the demands on the natural environment, right? We're stretching the bounds of sustainability from all three legs of the stool, right? We stretch our ability to be able to afford to maintain the built environment that we've created. We've put strains on our society that have created a very difficult to manage from any number of aspects, the social pressures that we've put on our state. And we've certainly put strains on the ability of the environment to both remain intact as a functioning system, and for that environment to provide for the needs of our society in terms of clean air and clean water. So having pushed ourselves up against the boundaries of sustainability, by necessity, we realized that we were heading down the wrong path. In the late 80s and early 90s, New Jersey passed the State Planning Act to try to come to grips with it on a wide basis. We were the first state to take hold of the broader brush of how we deal with these issues on a state level. We've also come to grips with having to take what I would call almost emergency measures by protecting the pinelands down in South Jersey and by protecting the highlands in northwestern New Jersey, because they were vital sources of drinking water, let alone the fact that they were globally important environmental systems that had to be protected. So taking those aggressive measures, either whether they were at the state level for planning or these regional, very restrictive planning laws that we put in place, were way ahead of the curve compared to other states, right? And and they're just, it's just the late. We've made decisions like that for a long time. The Newark watershed was set aside in the late 1800s because Newark understood that they had to set aside a source of drinking water to have a large city. If they didn't, they'd still be drinking Passaic River water, and nobody, right? That Newark wouldn't be able to survive because they wouldn't have a clean source of drinking water. New York City, around the same time, bought tens of thousands of acres in the Catskills for their reservoir system. New York City couldn't survive based solely upon the geographic footprint of New York City. They couldn't provide drinking water for themselves. So instead, New York City's true footprint is not just the 5 boroughs; it's the 5 boroughs plus thousands of acres in upstate New York where their drinking water comes from. So we've always had to make those kinds of forward-thinking decisions when you're pushing up against the boundaries of sustainability. New Jersey as a state has done it because we are the most densely populated state. We reach those limits before most other people. And so we're reacting the best we can. We're in a period now that after the 8 years of Christie administration that was very antithetical to those kinds of planning decisions, where we actually took a step back, and we've never really got to where we were back in the late 90s and early 2000s, when New Jersey was really at the national forefront of that kind of thinking.
Wait. Oh, there you are. Okay. I lost you for a second. But the last thing I heard was forward thinking. So, but then you stopped. So I think we got the message. Actually, you brought up a really good point before. I just wanted to backtrack really quick. So you were talking about the word sustainability, and it comes up all the time, and it comes up for me all the time. I hear it in listen to NPR and just everyone on social media platforms and everything. What in your personal opinion, why do you I feel like sustainability has been around for probably I would say 30 years, but before the 2000s.
It's been around.
All of a sudden now it's becoming such a huge thing. There's a few sneaker companies that are oh yeah, this shoe is made out of 100% recycled bottles, and there's all these recycling products and all this stuff. But why do you think, in your opinion or in your profession, why is it just blowing up now, or at least in the last 5 years? I feel
right. There's a couple reasons why. First is that in the last 30 years, that the population of the earth has exploded, right? We become, and we're pushing up against the boundaries of what a live, right? What's the maximum population the earth can sustain? Probably a lot more than we have now, but what's the quality of life that goes along with that? Probably not very, very high. But you look at what we're doing between, what we're doing to abuse the oceans, what we're doing in terms of the climate, what we're doing in terms of polluting the air, of depleting the earth's resources, that our capabilities as a species have gotten to the point where we're putting an awful lot of pressure on the planet right now, and that a lot of bad offshoots of that behavior are starting to become evident, right? The great garbage patch in the Pacific Ocean, again, climate change in itself evidence of our bad behavior, and you start to see what the impacts are. That's one element of it. Second is that the information exchange, the access to being able to see it, the ability to spread a message through social media or through traditional media is way beyond what the capabilities of our society ever had before. So you spread the message. The third is the identification of a constituency for that message that you can make a buck off of. And again, I'll go back. I don't really care whether or not you're going to be selling your sustainability message out of the goodness of your heart or out of a good morality, or whether you think it's good policy, or whether you think you could sell more sneakers because of it. The bottom line is, are you getting to a better result at the end of the day that's going to mitigate the impacts that we're having on the world? Right. So there's a lot of things going on. Right. I mean, sustainability as a concept goes back. I just talked it, right. New York City buying its water supply, buying the land for its water supply was a sustainability concept. Right. They understood that they couldn't survive as a thriving city without a water supply. So they did what they had to, forward thinking, made an investment that the people who made that investment probably didn't see the full benefits of that system. People today see the benefits of that decision, right? So that's a sustainable.
Like a 20-year investment. You're pretty much saying
100-year investment, right?
Yeah.
And so that's a sustainable ethic when you think about it. So the concept has been around forever. It's the monetization or the popularization of the concept as a defined theory. Is it relatively recent because of the things that I mentioned before, right? Some of it is because we're acutely seeing the consequences of our lifestyle, right? If the entire world started living like the United States, we'd all be dead. We'd be dead in 5 years, right? But what you're seeing is the rest of the world is starting to catch up to us in terms of standard of living. They're getting industrialized. They're starting to do the same things we do. Earth can't handle it. Right, Earth can't handle more than one United States. Right, China. Look at what China's doing. Look at China and India are rapidly industrializing places.
I was gonna say there's like a lot of countries, especially like India and even like Netherlands and Europe. Like they're already like there's a few areas. Even what was it? Iceland? No, yeah, I think it's Iceland. They're already 100% renewable, and it's just because they're on a giant freaking volcano. But hey, why not?
And their society is a lot less. It's a lot less complex.
Well, yeah, that is definitely true.
Right.
My point is that it's like there. My other question following this is like, because there's a lot of places, across the world where they're like, pretty much they're just about 100% renewable energy, maybe even 75 right now, and yet we're like kind of just jumping on the bandwagon. And it's like what makes them different from us in your professional opinion?
There's a couple answers. First of all, in the United States, it's politics and economics, right? It's our lack of commitment to getting there. The second is the size of our society. We're much larger than a country like Germany, which is a fraction of the size of the United States.
That's true.
We're right with a good economy, with an educated populace, with a smaller geographic area. for them to get to 100% renewal was a much easier road to go down than what we're going down. Right. So the United States is much bigger, much more complex, much more complex politically, socially. And then you look at countries like India and China, which are just on the fast track economically to try to grow. And 100% renewable is not within their vocabulary right now. And what you're seeing is that they're doing, maybe not as much damage as the U.S. is doing right now, but they're doing plenty of damage to the environment themselves. And getting those countries, put that aside, they still signed on to the Paris Climate Treaty, and we're the only country in the world that decided that it was a bad idea.
Yeah.
Because we know something that everyone else doesn't, because we're just so smart. It's
what makes us, I mean, maybe I'm being silly when I ask this, but I'm personally want to know is like, what in your professional opinion, like, makes us, I guess, smarter than everyone else for pulling out of it then? Or is it just because
it's politics, Teddy? It goes back to what I said at the beginning, right? We've taken a scientific concept and politicized it because there's a political gain to be made from it, and there are certain economic gains to be made from it as well.
okay.
And so we make a political point of not joining in something because we say, oh, it's not 100% in our interest, that somehow it's going to be economically detrimental to us. That's short-sighted and foolish. In the long run, it's far cheaper to get ahead of the problem and avoid the consequences that are going to come down the road. And in the long term, we'll be way better off economically by doing things proactively now than by waiting for bad things to happen and try to react to them. Right? The only reason we're not in the Paris Climate Treaty right now is because the Obama administration decided to join it. And we had a president who decided he was going to undo everything that was a legacy measure of the Obama administration to the extent that he could, right? For spite or for right, or because that's how he motivates his political bases through that kind. He motivates his political base through that kind of conflict and that kind of division. And that may be good for him for the short term politically, but in the long term, it's very bad public policy.
Yeah, right. That's what I was thinking. Just because, like, that, in my opinion, and then based on my knowledge, it's like that's just not good for the public good, regardless of your political interest or gain at all.
Right. The bill, right, and we're probably going to have to pay a bill for even 4 years of bad behavior, right? And that bill is going to come due and is going to have to be paid. And that bill may be economic, that bill may be environmental, that bill may be social, right? It's, again, there will be consequences there are consequences to bad behavior. There are consequences to bad policy. There are consequences to short-sighted thinking. And it's not going to go away simply because our
president was our former president was elected out.
Right. Well, yeah, and it's not going to happen just because I convinced 50% of the people that it was or I convinced 45% of the people that it was a good idea, and they passionately believe that it was. That doesn't make right. I passionately convinced 45% of the people that gravity doesn't exist. Right. Right. I passionately, I have passionate followers who believe that the earth doesn't revolve around the sun goes around the earth. Anybody who says so is a far left Looney Tune. Right. That's where our public discourse on serious matters of science has gotten. Right. Exaggerate a little bit there, exaggerate a lot there, and to illustrate the point. But that's no way to run a country. That's no way to make policy. Again, go back. You can disagree about how to get to the solution of the problem, but if you make it a political point to deny that the problem even exists, right? Where we go, right? The pandemic is a hoax. It doesn't really. It's not really happening. The media is blowing it out of proportion. Well, great. That made for some great political theater, but also made for 260,000 people to die from a virus that probably half of them didn't have to die from. Right? And that denial of science, that denial of because the other side says it exists, I have to say that it doesn't. That's just beyond that is so insane. It's beyond rational thinking. Yet that's how our public policy is being made right now.
Yeah, there's a lot of that going on right now. Well, and still until next year at least.
Well, right, and other countries got the virus under control because the problem doesn't go away by saying the problem doesn't exist.
Well, you just you just brought up another thing, because like it's funny that you said that, because China and a couple other countries, like they're pretty much already reopened by now, and we're about to go on lockdown again.
Right, because they faced up to the facts. Right, New Jersey is a good example, Ted. When the pandemic hit our state hardest, we took drastic measures that had.
Yeah, our governor freaking put us on a lockdown for like a couple weeks.
And nobody liked it. I don't like wearing masks. I hate my basement. I'm a people person. I like to be out amongst other human beings.
Right.
But the bottom line is you can't argue with the fact that we probably avoided having a lot more deaths than we actually did, because we did what we had to do when the problem manifested itself. We didn't say, hey, what the heck? It's really not that big of a problem. You go out there.
It's nothing. Don't worry about it.
Don't worry about a thing. It'll all be fine. Right? Imagine what the consequences of behaving in that manner would have been. But why? So I can go to, right?
Is not a good thing.
I can go to my favorite, so I missed a couple of weeks eating on Friday nights at my favorite restaurant. I still got takeout from them. It's the fact that I didn't get to go for a burger and a beer for a couple of Friday nights. Small price to pay versus the lives of tens of thousands of people.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of people that through the whole thing, I've just had, I'm more just taking precaution just to take precaution, but it's like, I mean, I know it's real. It's just like, there's other aspects of my life that just kind of made me feel very ambivalent about just the whole thing in general, whether it's, I mean, I know it's real. It's just like, because just certain studies that have been done, it's like, whether you're fit or not, or like have a very healthy lifestyle or not, like the side effects of having the virus and stuff are just so they vary so much. It's like, am I gonna feel it? Am I not gonna feel it? Like, am I gonna be?
And it's not only about you, right? You may get the virus, and it may be a relatively mild case, and you may survive.
Right. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, it could be very mild, and it also could be like, I feel like I'm on my deathbed and I could die tomorrow. Like,
or you could also play a role in spreading the virus to one or more people.
Exactly, that too.
Who will get very sick.
Yeah, exactly.
Right, and it's a part of being a responsible member of a society. Is behaving responsibly and taking, in the short term, measures that are going to have long-term benefits. And, and again,
I wear my mask at work mainly because I have to, but even when I go to the department store or wherever, if it's a public area, I always wear my mask, just because in case I do have it and I don't even know, I still don't want to be the culprit of, spreading it and causing another lockdown or something.
Behaving responsibly, right? And that's the thing.
You can only do so much, man.
Right. And if we had behaved as a nation responsibly, in all likelihood, we wouldn't be where we are now, right? We would have dealt with it.
Yeah, I wonder how our life would be like right now.
Right, and it goes back to, and again, because we don't value the problem avoided, right? And we don't understand by making an investment in avoiding the problem, that it's got a lot more benefit than solving the problem once it gets here, because we could see the solution, right? And, the problem is that we probably would have been a lot better off if we didn't have to find the solution.
Yeah, that's definitely true. All right, well, let's take another quick break, and then we'll be right back. So stay tuned.